In today's show, we discuss which country is the biggest global menace to world peace.
And now, the TNT Talk Show, daring to go where other podcasts fear to tread.
Hello, I'm Tony Fasulo, and I share the stage with my esteemed friend and colleague, Tayo Boya. Tayo, hello, my friend. I hope you're keeping safe and well.
Yeah, what the hell, Tony? What you gonna do, eh?
Come on, say hi to our esteemed audience that are tuning in to see and hear us today.
Yeah, what the hell? Hello, audience. Listen, if you want to know what God thinks of money, you know when people say money is the root of all evil?
Okay, I have a slight variation on that, but go on.
If you want to know what God thinks of money, just look at the people He gave it to. You're kind of like really out there. Anyway, all the richest people in the world, you look around and think, why can't you got money?
Well. It's not. Money's not the root of all evil.
The love of money is the root
The
of all evil.
love,
Actually.
exactly.
Okay,
The
all right.
love of money.
Hey, start one for the big guy. Yes, the love of money. The love of money is the root.
It is, because money's just a medium of exchange. But unfortunately, you have too much, and it corrupts some people. But that's a sideshow. Let's focus.
Let me
on
ask you
what
one. You were trying to correct my. Well, you were right because I didn't give the direct quotation.
Yeah.
Can you correct absolute power corrupt? Sorry, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Can you correct that? That's what people say, but that's not right.
They do. You're right. I don't know what the exact wording of that quote is, but I don't believe it's correct.
Yeah, it's very slight changes. Power tends to corrupt. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. If you don't put the tends to, you're not quite there.
That's very apt, actually. That quote's very apt for what we're going to talk about today, in actual fact.
Yeah.
Because obviously the topic of today is which is the biggest global threat or menace, I suppose, to world peace. And this is one of your topics. So do you want to kick this off?
I was perusing, traversing, traveling, whatever it is, trotting through the internet, as I am wont to do, when I came across an article from Investopedia, which claimed that America was rightfully dispensing sanctions and invasions in order to project and protect democracy across the globe. And I started asking myself that, from one point of view, it could be argued that countries that, for any reason, promote contumely and aggravation, war even, are actually disturbing global peace and harmony. They may have the best intentions in the world, but what are the results? And then I asked myself, well, actually, who are the biggest troublemakers? Right now, Russia is in the West anyway, well, specifically in the West, because hardly no one else believes it, but in the West, Russia is seen as being the greatest global menace to world peace, as is China, by the way, increasingly. And I wanted to have a chat with you and just work it out that really, which country is it North Korea with its rather eccentric, shall we say, leadership and access to nukes? Is it Nigeria, my country of birth, which, according to the internet, has all these hundreds of thousands of people who wants to share the money of their ill-gotten gains with you if only you'll give them their bank accounts. So which country, which country is it?
Well, isn't it when they've actually done surveys about this, and it tends to be geographical, because who you deem as a threat or a global menace to world peace is based on where you happen to live. And for instance, I've got a map in front of me here, and it is very geographic based on where you're from. So for instance, Russia, excuse me, Russia believe the US is the biggest global threat. Whereas if you go to the US, funny enough, they believe Russia and Iran and also China now are biggest global threats. India, on the other hand, believes Pakistan is the biggest global threat.
Can I stop you?
Yeah.
You can't have several biggest global threats. No, I mean, the biggest is a superlative, so it's just one. Okay. Which one is the biggest?
The top three. Out of the three.
All right, the top three biggest. All right, fair enough.
So there are several more, but the top three were those three in the US. So it wasn't any, well, there was the single one that stood out at the time. When this survey was previously done, it was Iran, but they've updated it and now it's Russia, of which is followed now China and then Iran. So it changes depending on what's going on in the world. So, and that's all different countries. I mean, by and large, however, when you spread this across the globe, the biggest important country that stands out is the USA across the globe. I mean,
exactly.
Troublemaker.
In fact, I'm going to allow myself to take a digression. I don't think it's digression. I'm going to digress here a little bit. How could Iran be the greatest threat to world peace? Because it's not a world power, it's a regional power. I don't see how, even if Iran blocked off the Straits of Hormuz and prevented all the oil that leaves the Straits of Hormuz, that would destabilize a large part of the world. But surely, let's say they had, the other countries tried to stop them militarily and couldn't, which is not impossible. Other countries together would actually defeat Iran, let's face it. But let's pretend, for the sake of argument, that they couldn't, and Iran actually just shut down the Straits of Hormuz. There are still other outlets for that oil.
It would be a big destabilization
for a while, but not a couple of years later, because we don't have to take the Straits of Hormuz.
No.
So frankly, honestly, I don't think that Iran can be.
Well,
that's what I want to say to you.
This is the American and Canadian point of view. Granted, it could be the media pumping this out, hence why they take this stance. Because if you view it elsewhere, nobody really believes Iran is the biggest problem.
Yeah.
Although
the problem, yes, but and I'm not even world. I'm still saying.
No, I'm with you. It's the press that frames the population's thinking. Because if your press and media highlight Iran have done this, or Iran have done that. I mean, we're not picking on Iran here as an example, but for the American point of view, they were believing this.
Yep.
The media was pumping this out. If you're seeing this point of view on the media day after day, you are also going to be influenced by that. There's no two ways about it. So if you're then asked in a survey, who do you think is the biggest destabilizing country, I suppose, in the world, you're going to think, well, I'm not worldly wise, but I've heard Iran in the news. Oh, it's got to be Iran. And it's not because the population is in tune with geopolitics and really understanding where the problems could lie. They're just regurgitating what they're being fed from the media. So this can be the case. And I bet you now, if they repeated the survey on a big enough scale, it would move from Iran. for sure. It would be Russia or China now. Although they did do a small sample, and that was the position now. So when they do a bigger sample, I suspect that that would also shift from Iran to, for a bigger population survey, it would say Russia or China as the biggest threat.
Well, did you ever watch or have you heard of a former late night TV show host in America called Jay Leno?
Oh yeah, okay. Jay Leno, of course.
He used to have a sometime segment on his show where he'd take a microphone and camera and hit the streets of America and ask passers-by various general knowledge questions. And some people have compiled these answers into entertaining videos on YouTube to show how ignorant Americans are. And some of them think that Africa is a country which is in Europe. They think it's a country in Europe.
I know.
And they think that they hold their elections, their presidential elections, in October. I mean, these are voters, right? American voters who think that they vote in October. And some of them don't know the state capitals of the state they're in.
Indeed.
So if you then say that these are the people who are going to be able to tell you who or what is the world's greatest threat, I don't think you stand ahead.
No, I know. I mean, we're now attacking the intelligence level of the average American, and let's be honest.
I like to call them abominable Americans. But...
Well, no, they're not. I mean, the people themselves are actually genuinely a good bunch of people, to be fair. It's the people in power that, as you've already said at the start of this show, are corrupted by that power.
Only a white man could say what you just said. Only a white man who is... Anyway.
Why are we going down that road? I mean, I'm making a generalistic statement.
Because you have to look at outcomes, not feelings. Outcomes. If what they call a grand jury, I don't know the difference between a jury and a grand jury. Do you? No. Anyway, you have this investigative juries. Maybe that's why it's called a grand jury, who decide whether a crime has been committed in the first place before it goes to court. I don't truly understand the system, but it seems to be that you convene a grand jury, they look at the evidence, and then they say, yeah, there's a court case here, or no, there isn't. Under what circumstances these juries can be convened, I have no idea. But I remember this case of a Trayvon Martin.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, a black teenager who was walking through an estate when he was chased by an armed guard. He was chased, he tripped, he fell over, he was on the ground, lying on his back. And by the way, guys, that's lying on his back, not laying on his back. To lay, L-A-Y, you put something down. You put something down, that is to lay. You lie by reclining. So don't stop running around, and I am addressing Americans here. Stop running around saying he was laying on the ground. He wasn't laying on the ground, he was lying on the ground. It's a bugbear of mine. He was lying on the ground, his back to the ground, his hands up in the air, and he was shot by that chap whose name will never pass my lips. And the grand jury decided that the guy who shot him had been acting in self-defense.
I know, but we're digressing here now. I mean, I understand this is quite emotive.
And it keeps going on and on. It's not one case is neither, it's sad for the person, but, and for the family.
Yeah, but...
And I wouldn't be saying anything. But when you have case after case after case,
I agree.
You have to ask yourself, what kind of society actually produces that outcome continuously? Now, that is relevant to this discussion. It's not irrelevant. You're just trying to write it up and say the average American. The average American says that you can shoot someone who is lying on his back with his hands in the air and call it self-defense. And that becomes a global menace.
That's not the average view of Americans. You've now made a generalistic view. Now,
How else could I?
granted, the single event that we're now talking about here was abhorrent. It was wrong, and the majority of Americans actually agree with you. So you can't
How do you
then
know that, sir?
tarnish. They do.
Now,
They
how do you know
do
that?
because of surveys. Everyone was up in arms about that,
The
and it was the
blacks were up in
few.
arms. The blacks were up in arms, and they were up in arms because that happened to a black guy.
Yeah, it
So I
shouldn't
think
be
that that's
that.
racist. That is racist in itself.
Well,
They
indeed,
weren't up in arms because it happened to someone.
it should be someone, not what the color of their skin. We all
Yes.
bleed the same, but
Although to be fair, it keeps happening to black guys.
it does. But okay, their philosophy, they have got some belief systems within the society that does affect their viewpoint, like we do. So that's their viewpoint. We certainly don't agree with the vast majority of their viewpoint. But then you could equally say that there's a group in China, the majority of people, because they're fed in that regime, have a viewpoint which we don't disagree with. We disagree with. So it
About
works.
what? About
It
what?
works.
Please be more specific. Don't just
Well,
generalize.
for instance, okay, a simple one. There's certain people in China who have no issue about eating dogs. Okay? Food source. Now we in the West are like, whoa, that's horrible. Dogs are pets. Dogs are furry humans. We view them that way because our relationship with dogs in particular, they're a family pet. But there's some cultures, and in China itself, in some areas of China, the dog is another food source. So you see, it's from their point of view. Their point of view is, well, what's wrong with that? It's like,
Yes, but that doesn't make them a global menace.
no, I'm not. I'm just giving an example. And neither does this viewpoint in the US
Of course
on,
it does. If you think that self-defense means shooting somebody who is lying on his back, it means that your idea of self-defense could be to invade another country just because you disagree with them.
I think you've made a leap now.
No, I'm trying to say, look, it's also about violence and the application of violence. If you don't understand that somebody on his back on the ground with his hands up in the air is not a threat to you, what else about threats don't you understand? I think that's a valid question.
I can see your connection now. Yes, okay. I can see that point of view, and you can sort of make that slight link that if this is
Slight,
in their but if it's in their psyche, yeah, let's
which is
let's develop this.
which is what I'm claiming, by
Yeah,
the way. I'm
you're
claiming
that.
that it's in their psyche,
Okay, if it's in their psyche,
which is
then
why I call them abominable Americans, which is where
okay.
we started the
So
discussion
if
from.
it's in the psyche, which okay, we can use that term as a discussion point. We don't know for sure. We can assume that, but we don't know. If it is in their psyche, and then they believe that self-defense also attributes you can attack somebody, although I don't agree with that. I don't think that is, because their defense, their idea of legally attacking someone is if they come into your zone, in your house. Your house is your kingdom. So if someone was to come in your house, you have the right to defend that and kill them, so to speak. And you, as the killer, aren't affected because they've entered your domain, your home. Now, you're right. If that is the psyche that they then have at a national level, then yes, they may believe that if somebody is a threat external as a country, their way of defending themselves means to attack and stop them as a potential threat. But now you're jumping the gun, because you don't get Americans now leaving their house going, oh, I saw this guy in the distance. He could be a potential threat, so I'm protecting myself. I'm going to shoot him.
What
I know
about
you
the
cited
case?
that example,
What
but that's
about the
very
case?
rare.
What about the case of that chap who traveled, was it 20 miles
I know,
during the,
totally illegal. He
but
wasn't let
he,
off.
Scott, what was his name again? I can't
He
remember
went
his
more
name.
than 20 miles. He drove 3 hours
Right.
to, 3
He was
hours.
let off.
No,
He's
he
free.
wasn't.
He's actually suing people now for
What?
saying that he is suing for millions of dollars the television stations that called him that said he committed murder. He's
So
actually
the
suing them.
television stations agreed by calling him a murderer, by traveling 3 hours to a to a rally and then shooting people, and he said that was self-defense, using a semi-automatic weapon as self-defense.
He got away
Now
with it
that's
scot-free.
warped whoever gave him the freedom.
He got away with it scot-free. And also, I'm on Facebook with people, arguing with people who defend him to the hilt and say that it was self-defense.
Wow.
I'm actually arguing people about it.
Now, I can't corroborate that story, whether he was let off or not. I thought.
Well, I don't want to turn this into yet another Google war.
No.
Which we did
No,
in our last episode. We were both. But as I always say to the audience, if you go to our locals, when this is published to locals, you will find all the supporting materials there, and I will support. I can't even remember the chap's name, but I will. By the time this has been published, I promise I will have found the corroborating evidence and
the URL for our locals so that our audience can actually go there now if they want to have a look. What is it? I caught you on the spot now.
You caught me on the spot, yeah. But if you go to locals and search for the TNT Talk Show.
What, locals.com, just for the benefit of those
people?
Go
to locals.com and search for the TNT Talk Show.
And you'll find us there.
And you'll find us. Happy days.
You can join our community and also contribute. Obviously, we're also on Facebook and other places like that, but Locals is a new platform which gives you, the viewer, the listener, the opportunity to contribute and engage with us directly, far more so than a lot of the other platforms.
Absolutely.
By all means, still visit the other platforms if you want to, but Locals is now a platform which we are using more extensively going forward. So. Anyway, this guy who we've sort of focused on, although we're slightly diversion from the topic itself, but you're trying to link the attitude of general Americans as a justification that their foreign policy is to attack external countries more readily, based on this philosophy that I'm defending myself by attacking them, which if it is true, I suppose it could be true to an essence, because if we look at examples of what's going on in the world, you are right. America's philosophy of late is let's stop whatever's going on over there. But then you could also argue, at what point do we have a stand back approach and go, nah, let them destroy themselves? Is that morally right as well?
Yes. So my position is this. If it's ever a question of one country against another, it becomes an international affair. And every country that lives in the global community has a right to have a say in international affairs. If it is, even if it is a genocide, but is carrying on within the borders of one country, then we should never intervene.
That's very absolute.
It's absolute, it's black and white, which you know I'm a black and white kind of person.
No, it doesn't work that way.
I'm saying it doesn't work that way. I'm saying that it should work that way.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying that it ought to work that way.
At what
Where
point?
you can actually say there's a gray area is when a community is fighting for independence. Because if they achieve independence, they then become an independent state. And what was previously a civil war is actually, and can be seen as being an international war. So that's where there's a gray area that you can exploit to say, Tyre, what are your ideas on this? But in the other two cases where it is just a bunch of hooligans, if you like, of some ethnicity or some type of, whether it's gender politics, people who support gender politics, who I would, for instance, happily sort of hunt down and put to the sword if it was legal, then I say it's internal to the affairs of that state. It could be hard to look at, so don't look at it. If you can't take it, don't look at it.
Well, you should.
But when it comes to international affairs, if it's country A is attacking country B, For example, we get all sorts of people who cry crocodile tears and shed all these virtuous and virtue signaling the tears and ideas and everything, but they don't actually do anything concrete to stop the invidious, wicked, which is the same thing, the wicked, horrible things that Israel is doing to Palestine, to the Palestinians. Nothing happens. They're the favorite child of America, and nobody seems to be able to touch them. And just we know there's dozens, I believe, of United Nations resolutions that Israel disobeys, and yet the disobedience to United Nations resolutions is what has given America and its cohort of vassals, I believe is probably a better word, American vassals called NATO, is what has given them the authority to go into places like Bosnia and Afghanistan. I think even Iraq. So it's definitely not a one size suits all, but when people like me point out the basic fundamental hypocrisy of people who support but we have to do something, it's like, well, why don't you do something about this then? So, and why don't you do it equally? If you did it equally, you would defang the likes of Tayo. You would draw our poison because we wouldn't have a leg to stand on. But because these people don't, then we say you're just using this as an excuse. You don't believe in the fundamental fairness of or charity of what you're doing. You're doing it for self-interest. And how come you always seem to do it where there's oil? For instance, if you look at it from an American point of view, it's like you don't do it for bananas. You don't
well,
you know?
Okay, yeah, you're right. You're right. Every incursion, every reason or justification, if you look behind the scenes, you're right. It seems to be more so when there's a product that they're after, because they're talking about self-interest. And it's true, most countries are only going to send their equipment and their resources to straighten a country out if there's some tangible benefit for them in so doing.
What's in it for me, bud?
That's it, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. And this thing about democracy is interesting because America's justification behind a lot of these, including NATO and Israel, all the rest of it, is this banner of democracy. Well, Israel is a democratic country, whereas a lot of the countries and the people around are not. And we base our whole view on democracy. If it's democratic, then they're a country that sees the light. Okay, whereas if it's not democratic, then there's a problem there, or potential problem, because autocracy, communism, dictatorship, let's be honest, they're not as good as democracy, but we're not saying democracy is the best either. It's the best of the worst of what we have in terms of ruling. So if they're going to pick something, they're going to pick something that aligns to their way of running things, democracy. And in so doing, they're going to hold those higher than those that aren't democracies. And if they can change countries to democracies, in their view, which is a viewpoint that some other Western countries agree with, then you're making the world slightly less fearful because you're not dealing with what you said at the very beginning of the show, power-hungry leaders who have no accountability to their nation, basically, because they can rule how they see fit, because the people have no real say. Whereas in a democracy, You can get rid of the leader if you don't like them. You've said it. So this is where the whole geopolitic platform is. It's based on this view that democracy stands above everyone else. So you're going to protect that wherever it happens to be in the world. Whereas if it's not, then you're going to take a less favorable view.
Well, unfortunately, I think I have to, for me to go along with what you've said, I'd have to agree with your analysis that the differences between the countries that America believes are democracies and those that they believe are autocracies. Mm-hmm. That could be the case, or it could be a fig leaf, but definitely they've never said, as far as I know, and I challenge you or anyone else to disprove me, they've never said we're going into this country because it's an autocracy. What they've said is we're going to this country because it has defied UN resolution number, blah, 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 blah. And we are acting as policemen of the world, and therefore we're going to go in and do something about it. Now, my point is about Israel is that democracy or not, it is defying UN resolutions. So by this standard, by which, let us say, Bosnia and Herzegovina, the old Yugoslavia, when NATO went in there, and they went in because of UN resolution, yada, 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 mm-hmm. Right? That had nothing to do with autocracies or whatnot. They were saying some people needed protection from the invidious, again, I use the word invidious, from the wicked attentions of the nascent Serbian state. And they had to go in to protect people. Now, we can all agree that the Palestinians need protection, but they're not getting it. Well, in fact, the Yemenis need protection, and they're not getting that either. And there's a standing case where the attacking external country, this is now an international affair, by the way, is Saudi Arabia. Yeah. But no one is touching them because they're such great allies and friends of America.
And they're not a democracy.
Yeah, and on top of that, they're not even a democracy.
Yeah, indeed.
So
but they're viewed as a friendly non-democracy.
Exactly. So the standards are very,
totally
there are no standards.
I totally agree with you because it is hypocritical. Yep. A lot of the standards, which is supposed to be this democracy thing, doesn't always bear fruit. If a country is not a democracy, but they seem to be okay in the world stage, then they're sort of viewed slightly differently or slightly better than others. Whether they're higher than a democracy or not, we haven't seen that scenario where you've got a non-democratic country having a direct beef with a democratic country, and where there's a definite, let's say, for instance, hypothetically, Yemen was a democracy and Saudi was now attacking it. I think there would be more condemnation, far more, despite the fact that Saudi is an ally with the West, of democracy, of Saudi's action on Yemen if Yemen were a democracy. But Yemen is not, so hence that's probably why they're saying, well, out of the two, they're both not democracies. We've got a standing arrangement with Saudi Arabia, and they're an ally, so to speak. But because they're not democratic, either of them, then we let Saudi deal with it. And this is probably why it's a more standoffish approach in this particular example. But in Israel and the Palestinians, yes, a lot of things are going wrong there, because you're talking of a tiger against a wasp in terms of their respective powers. But we also have to take into view that daily, from Gaza in particular, because remember, you've got the West Bank on the other side of Israel, which is full of Palestinians, but they don't attack Israel on a daily basis, which unfortunately is what's happening from Gaza. And then Gaza get the brunt of Israel's wrath more often than not. There's never any real problems with the West Bank. And there's more Palestinians in the West Bank than there are in the Gaza Strip. Where the problem lies is the Gaza and the leaders of Gaza, which are Hamas and the PIJ, I believe, they have a real beef with Israel, and they actually will not accept that Israel should exist as a state. They should be obliterated off the face of the earth. Hence, they don't want to even go into dialogue.
On behalf of the TNT talk show, I will say one thing about the TNT talk show. We are very lucky because Tony and I have divergent points of view. So if you've just heard what Tony has been saying and you're about to leap off from a tall building in despair, or even worse, grab a Kalashnikov and come looking for us, do be very careful to not come looking for me, because I'm going to dispute everything he's just said.
Okay.
The West Bank is safe. The West Bank is safer for Israel because it's isolated. You can smuggle weapons into Gaza, but it'd be very, very difficult to get weapons or anything into the West Bank. Yeah. That is one reason. The other thing about talking about why people are, just you said, they are attacking Israel daily. It's not as if the Israelis are not doing anything, and then these crazy, wild-eyed Palestinians are reacting. It's that you go to the farm, to your farm, which has been in your family for generations, and when you get there, there's a fence, and it's been fenced off, and it is now the property of Israel.
Agreed. No,
and then you get upset.
Go on to this.
You get upset. You go back and you react, and then suddenly you're being told, "Oh, you know these crazy Palestinians." So I'm just want those. So you can see that the temperature now amongst our listeners will know what's going on. Will be lowering. You should have led with that. They're not doing it for no good reason. They're doing it because they're upset. Absolutely. And they're upset for good reason. Some people are stealing the land in front of and the people backing them up, by the way.
I know.
The people backing them up also stole land. And the people they stole it from have been corralled into reservations where there's absolutely nothing. They didn't even give them if you're going to steal all the land, how about giving them some good parts of the land? But no, they took all the good parts of the land and they just put this people in just desert areas where there's absolutely nothing. Unless they find something there, and then they'll move them away even from that.
I'm saying it's not cut and dry. You're absolutely right. It's failings, major failings on both sides.
Okay, so I'm not like that. You know, I always take a stance. If someone comes to your house where you live and starts taking away parts of your property and moving in by force and harassing you and your family, and then you react, Tyre is going to be one of those people who says that whatever you do is fine by him. Because the people who say, well, you got to take, the big point of view. It's like, yeah, but this is my house. This is where I live. It's my land. If you're taking my land, all bets are off. You have no excuse. You have no sympathy from Tyre. You are wrong. End of story. Whatever happens to you,
this is the bigger picture. Finish. That's happening there is the fact that the Palestinians need their own country.
Well, they used to have it in Britain. The perfidious Britons, and I just say abominable Americans, I also say perfidious Britons, which is a play on perfidious Albion, but I think most people know what the hell Albion is, so that's why I say perfidious Britons, hadn't actually helped the people, if you know who I mean, to get to get their state of Israel, which has just caused permanent problems there, and now Israel as a nuclear nation is going to be really hard to dig them out of there without causing a big problem.
It's always a problem with geopolitics. Everybody is also fighting for their own land, their own resources, and if they feel they're being taken away, unjustly, which is obviously there's a gripe with the Palestinians here, then they've got a right to complain. And absolutely they should be heard and should be given that voice. When it's suppressed, which is what tends to happen at the moment, it causes additional problems. And you're right, Israel's not innocent in all this. Absolutely not.
I can't even see where Israel is going to go with this, because I don't know if you know this Sanskrit. It's not a proverb. It's one of the three laws of being that the Buddha elucidated. It's the first law of being. It's a Sabe, Sankara, and Nika. It means that no thing is permanent. And by thing, he meant all the classes of things, including concept really, including formations, maybe even like states. And that's what I meant by concept, the concept of the state. Formations, properties, objects, things like that, okay? None of those are permanent. And then he went on to explain why. So this state of Israel is definitely impermanent. And being impermanent, you would think that the people living there would be looking for an off-ramp to how they can make peace with the others. I'm not going off on one, by the way. I'm going to tie this back into the greatest menace.
Yeah.
They look for an off-ramp. They're in a position now to get a good peace because they are actually in a superior position right just now. But they're in a superior position because the country that supports them, the global hegemony or hegemon, the global hegemon, America, supports them, is able to support them. But with the rise of a multipolar world, is that going to be guaranteed going forward?
Well, I'm not sure that. I mean, this takes us on to the global menace. You're saying,
yes, that's what I'm saying. The global menace. That the global menace, which in my case, by the way, just purely, let me just be very frank with everybody. I believe the abominable Americans are the global menace by a country mile, by like a million miles. I'm not a great fan of China, by the way. I'm not. I mean, you know me and my passionate friendship, because I don't want to say passionate love for a man. My passionate friendship with President Putin, who, I think he's my hero. And the Russians.
Can you explain to our listeners, because our listeners may have a morbid interest as to why do you hold President Putin so highly in regard?
What a guy.
Just summarize in a couple of sentences very quickly.
He kicked out not just the Western carpetbaggers who were trying to rape his country without Vaseline, by the way, back in the 90s, but also the people who were helping them just to make money, the oligarchs. He took them on and he beat the hell out of them, and he protected his country, and he sat there and he made sure that people didn't use democracy as an excuse to get rid of him so that the carpetbaggers could come back in and complete the rape that he interrupted back in the 90s. And he stood up to them. He is strong. He has kept his country strong and healthy. He has made sure that the woke nonsense hasn't touched his country. And he puts you in prison if you try to make people woke, because it's nonsense, absolute nonsense. He knows, in other words, he's a leader, one of the rare leaders in the world today who actually can tell the difference between a man and a woman, whereas other leaders apparently are all confused as to what a man is and what a woman is. So he is my hero. He stood up to it. He's one of the people who's standing up for civilization and for common sense. And his winning was not to love.
Okay.
So anyway, where was
I? I'll let you say your piece, okay, for the
China. I said I was talking about China. Yes. Okay, so yeah.
Why do you not like China?
Oh my goodness, because
leader.
I see them doing to Africa what the Europeans did to Africa. They're doing the same thing, and it's not China's fault, not their fault. They can try, It's the fault of the stupid Africans. What is it? You already have historical precedents for what people do when they move in and they take over resources in your land, and you're repeating the same mistakes all over again for the sake of a few baubles. Why?
Because they need those baubles. They need that money.
Don't talk absolute nonsense. You don't need to sell your inheritance, your land, for the sake of some temporary relief. Nigeria, I was looking at I wasn't looking. Somebody told me about it, and he wasn't even telling me about this. It was just happened to mention our national budget for this year is 17 trillion naira. You might think that 17 trillion naira is a lot of money. 17 trillion naira, it turns out, is, I worked it out, what is this? I'm going to have to work it out again because I worked that and I was shocked is not the word that I want to use. Give me a second because this, when I tell you how much it is,
the budget,
the national budget for Nigeria, when I tell you how much it is, here we go.
National budget is 17.126 trillion.
Yes, and how much is that in pounds? And
What's that
1 pound is now 900. It's 900 pounds to a naira.
Not 900 pounds. Oh, 900 pounds to 1 naira.
900 naira to 1 pound. I beg your pardon.
Right. So 17.7. You divide that by
It's 19 million. It's 19 million.
No, it's not 19 million. It's 900 million.
Why can't it be 900 million, Tony?
Because trillion is huge. You divide that by 100.
To what I did, I might have made a mistake, but listen, it's 17, and then I just put 17,000 because behind that is millions. Okay?
No. 17 trillion is not millions. That's billions.
That's billions.
So you're talking a lot. You're still talking a lot of money.
No, it's what is it? It's 18 billion, isn't it? 18 billion pounds. Call it 19 billion.
19 billion, yeah, roughly.
For 250 million people. 19 billion. How much did America send?
That's 190 billion. Your maths are bad.
My maths are terrible.
190 billion. That's right. 190 billion.
Okay, 190 billion for 250 million people.
Okay, but then that's look at us in the UK. We've got 3 trillion economy, but not the budget.
All right. Okay? Yeah. Our budget is 1 trillion plus, isn't it?
What's that?
Our budget was 1 trillion plus.
Yes.
1 point something trillion.
Which is 10 times what that of Nigeria, and we've got a quarter of the population.
Right.
But then we're one of the top 6 countries in the world in terms of GDP.
Yes, but before, back in the 70s, the pound and the naira were on parity.
Okay.
Right? And what, as President Putin said is, and he actually used Nigeria as an example, he said he opposed the carpetbaggers because what they wanted to do was they said to him, we will come in and we will mine your oil. And he said, no, we are not going to be like Nigeria.
No, agreed.
We will mine it ourselves. And that's when the problem started between him and the West, between Russia, between the Western
hegemony. He put a stop on the fact to allow US in particular exploiters, you can say,
come in
and jump in and use the resources and take the profits. He wanted to exploit it themselves, although they didn't have the expertise, and he would have rather used the American companies as consultancy and paid them for their expertise, but then he owned the rights. But the Americans didn't want to do that. They were, no, we all do it for you. And hence why he went no.
Which is exactly why I say you don't then, for the sake of a few baubles, passing baubles, just temporary relief, you don't give in and say, okay, come in and take over my country. Well, that's the point I was making about the Chinese.
And that's why I also say, in the detail. If you're very good at negotiating.
That's why I also say I don't blame the Chinese, I blame the Africans. But I don't like what the Chinese are doing. They're taking advantage.
So are you saying that China could be or is rising up to be a global menace? Because let's be honest.
I am. Yeah.
Because
when it's not in their psyche though.
Oh, it is.
But they could find it. No, it's not in their psyche.
Expansionism is part of communism, actually. That's part of the DNA of communism.
Sorry, the Chinese character, the Chinese character. Somebody said this, okay? And it's very clever observation. Someone said the Chinese character is to build the wall and to keep the barbarians out. That's what they did. Once they had defeated the Mongols, they didn't go across and go, you know what, we've defeated the Mongols, let's spread and let's go and find where they come from and kill them all there. There wasn't a psychology. The psychology was, well, the Mongols, the barbarians are gone, build strong walls and keep them out and don't let them come back near us. When the West first showed up, they actually kept them in little settlements and said, we don't really want to mix with you guys. Let's just trade. Even today, they're just like, can we just trade? Mm. They don't really want to. It's only in the case of resource-rich Africa that they're like, yeah, these guys are clowns and we can take them out.
Well, it's like this claim. I mean, China at the minute have got this claim on Taiwan, even though Taiwan
claim on Taiwan.
Yeah, they have. No. China have. They want to bring Taiwan back under the fold, even though they've never actually had Taiwan as part of China. It's the reason they want to do that are twofold. Number one, because the original Chinese government fled after being defeated by Mao to Taiwan. And that's how it all started. So the Taiwanese government in Taiwan was the official China government. Yes. But then obviously Mao raised up the communism, pushed them out, and they fled to Taiwan. And then Mao, with his communist head on, wanted to bring those back under the fold. I don't know how he was going to do that, but he was going to do that militarily, but didn't have the resources at the time, and bring them back in the fold. But the legitimate government, as far as China originally were from, was in Taiwan, where they escaped to.
Yes, it was called Formosa by the Dutch, I think. I can't remember who called it Formosa. It was always a province of China. It was just an unimportant province of China, and it has its own indigenous population, which was decimated. It was even more, decimation is a Latin word. It means 1 in 10. Mm. When the Roman legions were punished for disobedience, the legion were forced to line up, and someone would count out every 10th man, and every 10th man would be executed. That was called decimation, right? So if I say that the Aboriginals in Taiwan were decimated, that would suggest it was 1 in 10, but it wasn't like 1 in 10. It was far more than that. I don't have the exact details, but they were merely obliterated by the Japanese, not by the Chinese, by the Japanese. When the Japanese were fighting who? They were fighting the Chinese. Yes. And as I say, it was a Chinese province. So all those people who were saying that it was not a Chinese province or was never part of China are talking absolute hogwash. This is Western Empire of lies, propagandistic nonsense. It was always a part of Greater China. The Emperor of China was always the Emperor of Formosa, whatever the heck the island was called before then. And the people who are there now are 98% Han Chinese, 2% Aboriginals.
So again, associate themselves with China.
They are actually called, they're not called Taiwan. That's not their official name. The official name is Republic of China. The official name of China is the People's Republic of China.
Yes.
So it is outsiders in the abominable Americans in the main who are again saying that they know more than the inhabitants of the area. Okay. And they can decide who's who.
So do the Taiwanese actually, who are in the island of Taiwan, do they actually want to be part of China?
There was, until recently, there was an understanding that they were gradually moving together. They were gradually coming back together again. They were trading. Everything was fine.
They've been trading for years.
Let me finish. You asked me a question. Let me finish answering. Yeah. They were trading. They were doing well. They were talking to one another. Everything was hunky-dory. And then in I think it was Bill Clinton, he then started this idea of funding through, oh God, if I remember the name, you'd have heard of it. It's not the Rand Corporation. Rand Corporation is the think tank, but he started funding them through Democracy Action. So this name that you'd have heard of, he started funding a separatist movement. And that separatist movement led to the formation of a party. And with this injection of money and educational materials and whatever that this thing was sending, this body organization was sending, it started forming this separatist movement. They eventually won power, actually. I think the previous president won power with this separatist movement, and the current president is a separatist too. But there's still a large part of the population. The last time I heard was something like 40% that wanted to join China, and it's not a thing that leads to strong passions. Being part of China doesn't lead to strong passions, unlike, let's just say, in Hong Kong. They'd rather, most of them would rather be left alone to do their thing. But by and large, they're like, yeah, if it happens, it happens. Actually, apparently, Nancy Pelosi's recent visit has actually started forming a strong opinion. It's backfiring in the sense that the people in Taiwan are now saying, oh, we don't want to be manipulated by the West. We've seen what has happened to Ukraine. Let's just sit down and have a chat with China, and let's just get back to China, which is why there is no direct military action against Taiwan by mainland China. They don't want to turn that away. They can see that there's a strong possibility that they can just take it easy, step by step. It doesn't mean they're not pressurizing them, but step by step, without violence.
That's the way
bring
forward.
It back in.
If
yes.
you want to do it without violence, diplomacy, and by giving them benefits, I mean, look, as long as you let the Taiwanese effectively carry on as they are, but then be influenced by China, that may work. But as soon as they start to say, well, we're going to come and take you over militarily, then straight away people's backs go up.
It's not going to matter, because eventually the Chinese will have to. They will, and they will. Right, I'll tell you what now, they won't do it now. They can't let Taiwan become an unsinkable aircraft carrier for the Americans. That would be like letting, I don't know, what island, Long Island or something in America, being like Cuba. It would be like letting Cuba become and the Americans wouldn't. Americans won't stand for it. It's too close.
Yeah.
So that is why, if the Americans start making moves, if China becomes independent, they can invite whatever the heck military they want to onto their island, because they're independent. The reason that they can't do it now is because even America says, by the way, there's a protocol, isn't there, that says America recognizes one indivisible China, which makes a nonsense of Pelosi saying she's free to go where she wants, because nobody is free to go to another person's country wherever the hell they want.
And that's the whole America, point of them keeping this vague ambiguity about the whole thing. You're right. One thing they say, we only recognize China, but on the other hand, they still support Taiwan, because basically Taiwan is the global chip maker. I mean,
they're taking it away from them now. They've forced Taiwan to reveal secrets. Why did Taiwan reveal secrets? How can anybody force you to reveal secrets?
I think
it's like, if you don't want,
it's contractually.
Is it?
It's contractually. Because what's happening is it's like
what a bad contract.
Oh no, well, the contract is not that. It's money again. It's all to do with money. At the end of the day, Taiwan have said we've got the chip manufacturing facilities here. We can accommodate anybody, and that's how it works. But in essence, they've allowed into these chip manufacturing processes key people from all these companies in their own segments. So they're, in essence, it's almost like an embassy in the chip company. So that embassy belongs to the US. That embassy belongs to Europe. That embassy within the chip, the chip making industry. So they have a big influence there, part of the contractual side of it. They're using Taiwanese facilities and obviously employing Taiwanese people, but the contracts are based almost like it belongs to that third party. That's why do you think Apple computers have no problems with chips? Why? They get them all made in Taiwan. How come they have no supply problems, whereas all the automotive companies have terrible problems at the minute getting the right number of chips? Apple, no problems at all. Why? Because they have this agreement with Taiwan. They can produce whatever they want in Taiwan verbatim, so they don't have any chip problems. They're pumping out phones, pumping out laptops You go into an Apple store, you can order one and have one in the next couple of days.
They have problems now.
Well,
because
of what China's doing, yes.
Well, China has just stopped selling them sand. Sand. Which I think is silly, because I think China is making the same mistake in sanctions that America is making, which is to stop selling. You should never stop selling, right? If you're going to stop anything due to sanctions, stop buying. Because Taiwan will be able to source sand from other places, and you've just damaged your own industry. However, when you stop buying from Taiwan, it's not easy to replace markets. And that's where people are vulnerable. And anyway, so I want to say one thing, because you
distracted me. Of the time as well. We
haven't even mentioned the number of countries America has bombed since the Second World War.
Well, go on, do it now. We've still got some time, obviously, but yeah.
I was going to say something about Taiwan, but
I've thrown you, have I?
You have completely. It's gone. Yes, 29 countries America has bombed since the end of the Second World War. And where is my? Okay, so there we go. So yes, and some of them are interesting. I mean, Afghanistan, Bosnia, Cambodia, but just starting from more recently, let's say from the 80s, you're talking about places like El Salvador, Grenada, minding its business, little island there.
Why did it bomb Grenada?
They had a problem with
is this all through? Okay, you got to also
the Monroe.
Have they done this independently, or have they done it with assistance or resolutions? You've got to sort of factor that in as well. Because if they've had a UN resolution, then it's not really them, is it? It's them asking permission. So that's slightly different. So if you could separate those, and that would make it more.
That's a fig leaf for me. People can take me up on it if they want to, and if they go into locals and we start arguing about it, I'll tell them what I feel about it, because it's like it's a fig leaf. Grenada wasn't a UN resolution kind of thing.
Okay. Syria. When you say bombed, what do you mean? Fighter planes going over and bombing the, pardon my language,
I know what you want to say.
Yeah,
Jesus out of them.
Or was it just to tell them, "Oi, stop this"? How sort of bombing is it? Bombing.
It's the American military landing ordnance on them, most times from afar. Okay. So shelling from ships and missiles and things like that, and aircraft. Yes, so bombing.
Okay, interesting. But I'd still like to see the separation between.
What I can do is I'll take you up on that. I'll take you up on the offer you've just made, volunteered. You just volunteered. I'll send you the list, and you can do that research yourself and put it into the locals, and that would be great. And you can make the distinction and say this is this and that is that.
Well, you brought it up. I'm just challenging your figures.
So you challenge. What normally happens is when in academia, for instance, somebody says something and says this is the list of places that were bombed. Somebody says, yeah, well, which of those? You come up with the counter argument. Say, you see, you're wrong. But hang on, this is what happens in academia. You see, what you've done, where you failed, Tayo, is to recognize the difference between this one, which was under UN resolution, yada yada yada, and that one, which was not. Because then you're making a counter assertion. You don't then write back to me and say, can you go back and do all this further research? And like, yeah, no.
Okay, let me ask you then. What was the number you quoted? 49?
29.
29. Okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to ask our listeners to do that. Listeners and viewers watching this or listening to us, please can you do your research and counter Tayo's argument and say exactly out of those 29, how many did the US have, in quotes, justifiable cause to do it because they then received UN backing, UN resolution backing. So let's see whether that number does come down, and then we can revisit this question and say, why have America unilaterally taken the decision to attack a sovereign country without UN resolution dictated to? Then that would then imply that they are doing it off their own back because they're bullies.
One thing I did do was to separate those countries where US is no longer bombing them from countries where US is presently bombing them. And that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 of them the US is still bombing till today.
Which ones are they?
Iraq.
It's still bombing Iraq.
Yes, it's still bombing Iraq. They're still operating militaries in Iraq, and they're still detonating ordnance in Iraq to today.
Is this because?
And that is not under any UN resolution. In fact,
is the Iraqi government asking them to do it, or they do?
The Iraqi government has asked them to leave.
Ah, okay.
And they've said no. Libya, amazingly, they're still bombing today. The first action was in 1986. Then again in 2011. Apparently, they're supporting one of the two factions. You know, there are several factions. One is backed by, I think there are three factions. One is backed by, I believe, Russia. Another is backed by Turkey. And the third is backed by the Western hegemony, the Empire of Lies, as President Putin calls them. That's not a UN resolution. Pakistan, where they go and they...
Pakistan?
Yeah, don't forget that when you bomb Pakistan, you're bombing what you call a terrorist, but you're actually flying your drones into Pakistan without Pakistani permission, and you're detonating and you're killing. Maybe you're getting the whatchamacallit, the terrorist, one man's terrorist, another man's freedom fighter, but I'll accept terrorist. You're bombing terrorists, and then you're killing civilians. So basically, you're bombing them. And Somalia, same thing. And that's not, again, not under UN resolution. Actually, since none of the present ones, Syria is definitely not under UN resolution, because I personally think that the Syrian one is the most egregious example of American hegemony. And then Yemen. So
I'm surprised that they're bombing Yemen. I thought they left that to Saudi.
I don't have the details, but every so often their warships do something, but I don't have the details. It's not something they like to talk up.
Okay, I'm mindful of the time here.
And sanctions. There were anyway. All that. Yes, I didn't think we're going to have enough. I thought this episode we're going to be stuck, because I recently came across this way of thinking that is familiar to scientists, which is that we have a cognitive bias to try to confirm things.
Yeah, we do.
And the
keeps
example
our
that
world order in our head.
The example that was given was this. I'm going to give you three numbers. Let's see if you can avoid it, right? I'm going to give you three numbers, and then you give me another three that tries to match the sequence that I gave, and I'll tell you whether the rule that I'm applying, whether you got it or not. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So 2, 4, 8.
Okay. 16, 32, 64.
Right. And how did they work that out?
Because each number is doubling the number itself. So you get 2, 4, 8. So I put 16, 32, 64.
Right. The sequence agrees with my rule, but that's not my rule.
Oh, wow. What's the rule?
Well, come on. I'm not going to just give it to you. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to check your bias.
Yes.
So go on.
But these are the rules. This is the rule that I can see based from my point of view.
It's not the rule.
No. You've missed what I said here. I know it's not the rule. It's my rule based on the current information I have. You're not trying
to guess your rule or make up a rule that suits you. You're trying to understand. You're trying to guess my rule by checking your bias. That's the exercise. The exercise is to check your bias, and if you can check your bias, you'll be able to figure out my rule. Try another three. Try another three. Try another three. I mean, we're hurrying up, so try one more three. One more sequence of three numbers.
Go on then. Is this relevant to the topic? Because
it is. Go on.
You're just trying to use our confirmation bias, and you're trying to give a strange example of what that is. But the same applies to you, because in other conversations we've had,
Just give me three numbers, Tony. Stop wiggling and dodging. And
what, you want me to give you three numbers?
again,
three.
try another three numbers. But what you're trying to
for
do,
this sequence.
Yeah, what you're trying to do is you're trying to figure out my rule. So give me another three numbers that can help you.
Confirmation bias, but okay.
Oh.
You said my original numbers were wrong.
I said that they conformed to my rules, but the rules that you gave me are wrong. The sequence is right according to my rules, but the rules that you gave me are wrong.
The justification of my
yes
is wrong.
Yes.
But if the outcome...
No, don't go to the outcome. Give me another three numbers, for goodness sakes.
Well, I don't know. Again. Don't know that will meet that criteria, because 2, 4, and 8 is exactly what I expected it to be. So my output has matched your 3 input numbers in terms of the end result. So whether my rule is exactly like yours, if it brings the end result the same, then we found 2 solutions that bring the end.
You are a Sanhedrin. You would have fit in perfectly with the Sanhedrin of the Bible. The people who sit down and they look at the little squiggles and things, and the lawmakers, the people like that. First of all, you're not even doing what I'm asking you to do, which is to give me another number, to use sequences to discover the rule, just as if it was a game. If this was a computer game, there'd be no one to argue with. You only argue with me because I'm here. If it says keep using 3 numbers sequences to discover my rule, but you're trying to change the rules. No, that's not what you mean. No, what are you arguing about? You should have given me 3 numbers.
You've said the numbers.
Just give me 3 numbers, Tony.
Okay.
Give me 3 numbers.
That won't match
random.
Anyway.
Give me 3 random numbers.
Random numbers. Okay. 12. No. Yeah. 12, 16, 20.
It matches. It matches. What's the rule? You don't know. Give me another 3. But it matches. Yes, it goes by my rules. It fits my rule.
Oh, very clever. Okay, 9, 10, 11.
Fits my rule.
Yeah. You just want 3 numbers.
Wrong. Try another 3.
Oh, you want the 3 numbers that are bigger than the first 3.
There we go. Well, what could you have said, though? You could have said
9, 12, 10, 11. 100,
no, you could have said 9, 8, 12. That wouldn't have fit my rule. See?
Okay.
So you'd have checked but you couldn't get out from your bias. You would kept being stuck, like me. I didn't get this right. We are stuck trying to make it fit into what we understand. And it's the same thing I thought to myself. Now, with that in my mind, I'm going to come here, and within 5 minutes, I'll say to you, let's look at America is the greatest menace to the world. Let us check our bias, because I'm very biased that America is the greatest menace to the world. And let us try to find evidence that it is not the greatest menace to the world. And if we can't do that, then America is the greatest menace to the world. And after that, it'll take us 5 minutes, because if I put it to you as an open question now, that which country is a greater menace to the world than America and why, and I'm going to give you that option now, go for it.
I can't find one, because I agree with you. America is the biggest menace. I actually was in agreement with you.
I'm saying, but that's how I thought it would be a 5-minute matter that China isn't, because it doesn't have the military or the soft power to be the greatest menace to the world. Russia, which has the military, doesn't have the soft power or the posture. I mean, only one country has got 7. There's debate. Some people say 800, some people say 700, but I'm going with the lower number. Only America's got 700 foreign military bases.
Yeah.
Even though military base, by the way, can mean 3 people in a room.
Yeah, I agree.
So you have to be very careful what you mean by base, right? That I've really thought, I really did that, trying to change my mind and go, okay, maybe, could it be China if they really were the origin of a engineered disease, COVID. If COVID is engineered, did China then engineer it, which I think would make them a very good candidate for being the greatest menace to the world if they could do that. But then you've got this little known story that I wonder if you even know about, that Russia is now, from the papers it captured in Ukraine, from the biolabs, is now outright accusing America of being the developers of COVID. And taking it to the United Nations.
I mean, we've gone way over time here. That's a topic for another day. We can see where that comes from.
Well, it's going to the United Nations, so let's wait till it hits.
Let's wait and see what that is, because if that is the case, then that's really bad. But then, based on what we're saying and what we've even touched on during this show, America do things for self-interest purpose, and they do things based on what you originally said, which is attack a distant nation because they feel that that's their way of defending. So if that is a philosophy that they take on board and want to and use, then yes, then America is the global menace of the world. Although
don't forget
extrajudicial,
don't forget extraterritorial judicial actions, such as Julian Assange and who else was it again?
They can use their, but let's be honest, that's a bully tactics, isn't it?
Yes.
The fact that they're powerful, they can do things with impunity. They believe they are privileged in order to do this, and everyone else has to obey.
Pick up anyone anywhere for any reason.
And that's the problem with them getting too big for their
breaches.
Yeah, indeed. So in your summary, while we must end it now, what's your view then? Who is the biggest global threat?
The abominable Americans.
Unfortunately, I do agree with you. And also, unfortunately, we have reached the end of the show for another week.